Good morning,
Good morning.
everyone. This is Debbie Royce, ESD's Corporate Secretary. I'd like to welcome everybody to this morning's ESD Audit and Budget Committee meeting. And before we get started, I'd like to just take a roll call of the committee members. Commissioner of the Department of Economic Development, Hope Knight.
Present.
Benson Martin, designee for the Superintendent of New York State Banking. Department of Financial Services, I'm sorry.
Present.
And Michael Rosen, were you able to join?
Present.
Terrific. Thanks so much. Hope, and you're ready to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Hope Knight, and before I call this meeting to order, I will note for the record that I will serve as the acting chair of today's meeting. I now call to order the meeting of the Audit and Budget Committee members of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, Empire State Development, for Thursday, June 30th, 2022. Before we get started, I will ask everyone to please mute your phone until you're ready to speak. Also, for the record, I will ask that anyone wishing to speak, please be sure to state your name before you begin. I'd like to note for the record that in accordance with current legislation, this meeting will be conducted by teleconference. I will also note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda by submitting their written comments by noon yesterday. I'd like to further state for the record that no comments were received from the public concerning today's agenda. The committee members have received the agenda in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. Also, note that since there are no voting items on today's agenda, we will not be calling for the committee members to indicate any potential conflicts of interest with respect to today's agenda. I will now ask Kathleen Mize, ESD's Deputy Chief Financial Officer and Controller, to lead our discussion today on the first agenda item relating to the annual financial reports. Kathleen, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Hope, and good morning, members. As we do each year, we are going to review our audited financial statements for the period ending March 31, 2022. Present on this call are Douglas Zimmerman and Brent Jensen, partners of EFPR Group, CPAs, PLLC, ESD's audit firm, and they will be taking us through the reports to present to the audit committee. Doug, Brent, when you're ready.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Again, I'm Doug Zimmerman, partner with the EFPR Group, and going to walk through the presentation material. I believe all the members have that. And obviously, under the remote format, we just, on the table of contents, changed it a little bit. There are 5 different tabs, but we also put some page numbers on there so everybody can follow along. And we're just going to start on tab 1, which is obviously page 1 of the presentation. This first section is a number of the auditor's reports that we issue in connection with the preparation of the financial statements. The first on pages 1, 2, and 3 are our independent auditor's report on the comparative financial statements for the year ended March 31st of 2022 with the comparative information for 2021. This opinion is what we call an unmodified or a clean opinion. There are no exceptions noted in the preparation of underlying accounting records that deviated from generally accepted accounting principles. If any of the members are comparing this opinion to a similar opinion last year, you would note there's a change in the format of the opinion. That is in no way reflective of ESD. That is simply a change in the overall standards that the accounting profession has in place. So there are a couple of extra paragraphs in there. Again, it's the standard language that we're allowed to and must have in relationship to an unmodified opinion. So again, this is exactly what you would want to hear, is that everything was according to the rules and regulations that the organization has to follow, and the opinion provides a clean bill of health on the financial statements. On page 4 and 5 is another opinion that we issue with regards to internal control and compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. This is another set of rules and regulations that the corporation has to follow. And again, this is a unmodified or clean opinion with regards to government auditing standards. Again, there were no issues that we noted that warranted the reporting in this opinion. The third opinion that we have is on pages 6, 7, and 8. It's an independent auditor's report with regards to investment compliance. The corporation is required to comply with the rules and regulations of New York State with regards to the type and format of the investments, and so we test that in relationship to not only the law but the underlying investment guidelines that the corporation has in place. And again, there were no issues there. This is also an unmodified or clean opinion. The last report that we have on pages 9, 10, 11 in this section is another independent auditor's report that we issue in accordance with internal control and compliance over what is referred to as uniform guidance. You may also hear it called a single audit. It is a set of rules and regulations that any governmental or nonprofit entity that receives over $750,000 of federal awards is required to comply with. And again, there's a whole host of tests of rules and regulations and internal controls that go well beyond a standard audit and beyond a audit in accordance with government auditing standards. And again, we performed all those tests, and this is, again, a clean opinion. There were no issues with regards to internal control or compliance with the federal regulations. So those are the various opinions that we issue, and again, all the clean, unmodified opinions. One thing I wanted to mention before we get into Section 2 is just, we want to thank Kathleen, Mary, Gladys, and the rest of the ESD staff that we worked with throughout the engagement for all their help in providing the necessary information. As I'm sure you're aware, this is a extremely large undertaking. We begin it really at the beginning of the year. We came out in March to do interim work, and then we came out again during the month of May to do detailed test work. And everything that we asked for was very timely received in the format that was easy to work with. And we certainly would not be able to be here today reviewing these results, and obviously very good results, if we hadn't had that excellent cooperation, not only during the audit, but obviously management has to maintain the records throughout the year to be able to get us to the point where we're able to report back to the committee with the results of the audit engagement. On the second tab on page 12, is what's referred to as a report to the audit committee. This is required communication between an audit firm and the governing body. It's a set of rules that came about, it goes back about a dozen years ago now, back in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. They set up along rules that require a very specific communication in writing between an audit firm and the governing body so that there's no misunderstandings with regards to very specific points that are communicated. I won't go through each one of these bullet points, but all the underlined items on pages 12 through 14 are those required communication. And this is all of the standard allowed required boilerplate language, that everything was according to plan. There were no issues. There were no disagreements. The only thing that would be unusual in here is actually on page 12 in the first section with regards to significant accounting policies. There was the adoption of a new standard in the current year, what's called GASB standard number 89, having to do with how interest on construction projects is recorded. Under prior regulations, the interest would be capitalized as part of a construction project. 89 was put into place, and that changed it. So now you expense the interest when it's incurred as opposed to capitalizing it during a construction phase. So that's the only new standard that was put into place with regards to these financial statements. And obviously with the type of development activity the corporation undertakes between Javits and Moynihan, there certainly was some construction period interest that you would see in prior years had been capitalized and in the current year was expensed. The next report that we have on tab 3 or page 15 is, again, a clean bill of health with regards to our reviews of internal control and compliance in accordance with in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. And again, this is a clean bill of health. There were no issues that we noted with regards to the internal controls that the organization follows in the preparation of the underlying accounting records. The last two tabs, tab 4 is an analysis of the consolidated financial statements, and that's really where we'll go through some of the highlights of the change in the financial operations between 2021 and 2022. And then tab 5 is a complete copy of those audited financial statements for the year ended March 31st of 22. On tab 4 on page 16, this begins the overview of the organization. The first several pages really just talk about the various economic programs that the corporation is involved with. I certainly am not going to go through those in detail, but they really spell out all the various activities that the corporation is involved with as far as economic development goes throughout New York State. There's also a section on page 22 that refers to the various subsidiaries and the economic development projects that they're undertaking, such as Moynihan Station that I mentioned, the New York Convention Center Development Corporation, which undertook a large expansion of the Javits Convention Center, and the other subsidiaries that the corporation oversees. These are consolidated financial statements. So these various subsidiaries, all the financial information of them roll up into the consolidated financials that I mentioned in tab 5. And really, the summary of the financial statements and one of the areas that we want to focus on is pages 27 and 28. Page 27 is a summary of the condensed statement of net position, or in a commercial enterprise would be thought of as the balance sheet, reports the assets, the liabilities, the net position of the corporation as of March 31st of each of the years. And we've presented 3 years for comparative purposes here, so you can see the changes that occur from one year to the next. And just keep in mind that these are the balances as of that specific date, March 31st of those specific years. Obviously, if you look at those various accounts, either right before March 31st or right after, they would be different because of the activity that occurs on those dates. So this is a snapshot in time of that particular date. And then on page 28 is similar information of a condensed nature of the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. But this is for those fiscal years, April 1st through March 31st of each of those years. And again, we see the 3-year comparison, so you can see the change in the activity of the various accounts for those 3 years. And with that, if we can turn to page 29, this begins a summary of an explanation of some of those information. But what we really wanted to focus on is really at the start of page 32. And that is the detailed explanations that resulted in the change in net position or net income or loss for the year, and then how the adjustments to revenues and expenses impacted those changes in net position. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my fellow partner, Brett Jensen. He's going to walk us through some of those explanations for the account balances for the fiscal years. Brent?
All right. Yep. Thank you, Doug. So on page 32, as Doug was mentioning here, we start to break down what happened in your current year operations and what the causes of the various changes were. As noted on the top of the page here for 32, there was a change in net position. That was a loss of net position of $112.8 million this year in comparison to a prior year gain of $151.4 million. That was driven by increases in both revenue and expense. The revenue is detailed here on 32, about halfway down the page. Your operating revenue increased to about $1.5 billion this year in comparison to $974 million last year, a change of about $550 million. That was mostly due to the increases in 2 areas. The economic development grants increased by $717.8 million, and that is largely pass-through money that the state funds these grant programs through you for you to manage and operate. You'll see a similar change on the expenditure side, and you can read the individual grant programs that were significant this year here. Additionally, you had other revenue increase by about $70 million, about 53 of which related directly to your statewide advertising programs that really effectively went back to pre-pandemic levels. On the decreases in the revenue side, there were 2 other significant items, both of which relate to the reality that Javits and Moynihan went into a substantially completion status. You previously had state appropriations and grants related to those construction that effectively completed. Going forward to page 34, we can look at the expense side of this picture. And your expenses this year increased to $1,683,000,000, up from $771,000,000 about. The biggest pieces were very similar to revenue here, where you had the economic development grants, where you had the increase of about $720 million on those pass-through type grants. And you had an increase of $65 million in the general administration, mostly related to that same marketing and advertising program that we discussed on the revenue side. Beyond that, the one other really major change that there was the increase in depreciation. You picked up an additional $93 million in depreciation this year, which relates, once again, substantially to the completion of Javits and Moynihan, which brought two very large projects into a status where they begin to depreciate. So that really is what drove your financial results this year. And if there's any questions in regards to that, we're happy to expand as you need.
I'd like to remind everyone to please state your name before speaking. As noted earlier, we do not have any comments from the public with regard to this item. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members on this item? Hearing none, thank you, Kathleen. I want to commend you and your team for producing such excellent reports, and I know it takes a lot of time in a short period of time to get this done, so I really do want to commend you and your team. I will now ask Tom Brennan, ESD Senior Vice President of Internal Audit, to present the Internal Audit Progress Report. Tom, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Hope. This is Tom Brennan, and good morning, members. Our report today is brief. Since the prior meeting in late March, the issued reports are the two internal control reports, one for ESD and one for DED. They get issued annually. Results continue to be good. The controls in the company continue to be strong, and we assist on that process with our ESD compliance officer in terms of the groundwork that supports those reports. In terms of work in progress, the ESD, on the ESD side, we handle both ESD and DED audits. The ESD side, we have a venture audit that's in progress. We also are working on the COVID Small Business Recovery Grant Program, and we are making significant progress on that audit as well. And lastly, we are in the process of trying to complete a DED finance targeted audit. We also, because of all of the programs that are being instituted this year, we have sought to increase our staff by 2. We currently have 2 3/4 FTE, and we're looking to increase that by 2, and we're moving forward in the interview process, and hopefully we'll have some successful offers accepted within the next several days. And that's the report for internal audit. Thank you. If there's any questions.
Yeah, I would like to remind everyone to state your name before speaking. As noted earlier, we do not have any comments from the public with regard to this item. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members on this item? Hearing none, thank you, Tom and committee members. There being no further business, I will call a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved, Michael Rosen.
I want to thank everyone for your participation in this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.